Okay, so this is our first video for the summer calc summer assignment. Factoring is going to be key, especially in our first few units where we're doing a lot with limits. Factoring is how we Factoring is what we often use with our limits in order to algebraically manipulate it into a form that we can simplify. So there's two ways really that a lot of you have probably learned how to factor, and that's either with a t-chart and saying, hey, this is our a times our c value, and this is our b value. Well, we need something that multiplies to that number and something that adds to that number. Or you learned the Xbox method. Similar thing, a times c and b down here. I personally prefer the table just because that way if I mess up the first time, I can go ahead and go down the line of checking some values. And you only really have the one chance here where you're working outwards, and I don't know. It's up to you though. So if I look at this one, I have x squared plus x minus 2. So what I would do is I would say, okay, well my a value is 1, my b value is 1, and my c value is negative 2. So if I set up that table here, I would say, hey, what multiplies to a negative 2, but adds to a positive 1? So I'm thinking, okay, well, to get to 2, I need a 2 times a 1 here. And one of these has to be negative, but I want them to add to something positive, so that means this 1 is going to be the negative value, because that's the same as a 2 minus 1, which gives me the positive 1. If I made my 2, which is my larger number, negative, I would end up with a negative 1 here. So my factors on here are just an x minus 1 times an x plus 2. If you were using your Xbox method here instead, you would just set this up like this. You would say, okay, well, what multiplies to negative 2 but adds to a positive 1? And then you would say, okay, our two possible numbers, 2 and 1 go here. Well, I need to reduce that by 1, so that one's going to be the negative. Get to the same thing, an x minus 1 times an x plus 2. Now, when you see problems like example 2, what you need to do first is you need to say, hey, these both have an x here. You need to look for those things that they have in common first. So really, another way you could think about this would be, okay, I have an x squared times x minus a 4 times x. So I'm going to do the opposite of my distribution. I'm going to factor back out one of these x's. So I'm going to have an x times an x squared minus 4. So this x here, I'm just pulling it out of each of these and bringing it back out into the front. Now that we're here, we need to remember that rule that says, hey, if you have a squared minus b squared, that can be broken into two factors. An a plus a b times an a minus a b. So in this case, our a value is going to be 1, because we know that a squared is equal to a positive 1, so our a value equals 1. And for b squared, well, that's equal to a 4 here, so that means our b value is going to be 2. So final factored form then, x plus 2 times x minus 2. So final answer. Now in example 3, it's similar to what we did here. We had to find what these have in common first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this up a little bit. This is the same as a 3 times a 3x squared plus a 3 times a 22x and plus a 3 times 7. So we'll notice each of these have a 3 here. This is going to make our t-chart a little easier to use because it makes our a and c values smaller. So if I factor that out, that 3 comes in the front, and then what gets left behind is the 3x squared, the 22, and the 7. And then when we're here, we look at that a, b, and c value again. Okay, so our a value is 3, b value is 22, and c value is 7. So I'm going to do my table up above here just to keep some space. So I'm saying, hey, 3 times 7, that's 21. And I want to know what multiplies to 21 but adds to 22. Our answer for that is going to be A1 times 21. So A1 plus 21 is indeed 22. So what we actually do here, though, is so we have that 3 times, we keep the 3x squared. What we're doing is we're saying, hey, this 22x can break up into 2 parts, a plus x and a plus 21x. Because really, I haven't actually changed my equation. I'm just breaking that up into 2 numbers that are going to help me factor this. So now that I'm here, we're factoring by grouping. I'm going to group these 2 and I'm going to group these 2. I look for what they have in common. This one, they both have an x, so I'm going to divide that out. For these 2, they're both able to be divided by 7, so that's what I'm going to pull out there. So this 3 out front is going to be here. If I take x out of here, it's going to look like an x times a 3x plus 1. Plus, well, if I take 7 out of each of these, it'll be a 7 times a 3x plus 1. So you should be recognizing, hey, these both have a 3x plus 1. That's actually your first factor here. So 3x plus 1. My second factor, what I'm technically doing is factoring this out of each of these. I'm dividing this out, so what it would leave behind is an x and a plus 7. So that's my second factor, x plus 7. So there are practice problems on this down below. You have to complete those for section 1. If you need more assistance with this, feel free to email me or watch the other video that the teacher at Southeast made.